Israel's army chief, Herzi Halevi, has warned that the war with Hamas will last for, quote, many more months. In a televised address, Halevi said Israel is fighting in a complex environment with no magical solutions or shortcuts. The remarks come as the Israeli military intensifies operations in the Gaza Strip, where the death toll is approaching 21,000.
Unidentified human corpses, wrapped up, lined up, and laid to rest in a mass grave. It's become a common sight in Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry claims that Israeli forces returned the bodies after first taking them from morgues and graves to check there were no hostages among them. Israel says it is now fighting on multiple fronts, not just inside Gaza. This footage reportedly shows the downing of a, quote, hostile drone by an Israeli fighter jet over the Red Sea. Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen claimed responsibility for the drones, which attacked the Israeli port city of Eilat, as well as cargo vessels in the areas. The Yemeni Houthi armed forces confirmed the continuation of their operations in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea against Israeli ships or those heading to the ports of occupied Palestine. As international pressure mounts on Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu outlined 3 prerequisites for peace in an article for the Wall Street Journal: the destruction of Hamas, the demilitarization of Gaza, and the de-radicalization of Palestinian society. His words are the closest yet to a tangible vision for an end to the war. But with increased attacks from Hezbollah from the north and the Houthis from the south, the conflict appears to keep on escalating.
Our correspondent Jan-Philipp Scholz is standing by for us in Jerusalem. Jan-Philipp, Israel says it's fighting a multi-front war against multiple adversaries. How worried are Israelis that this war could still escalate into a larger regional conflict?
People here are worried. Israel's defense minister stressed that Israel is already fighting a multi-front war, and he mentioned 7 sectors throughout the region. As you know, fears regarding regional escalation have been there since the beginning of the war, but a few incidences in the past days have even increased this fear once again. At the so-called blue line between Israel and Lebanon, there have almost been daily battles between the Israeli army and the powerful Iran-backed Hezbollah militia. Also, other Iran-backed militias, such as the Houthis in Yemen, have intensified their attacks, especially in the Red Sea region. And a senior Iranian official was killed close to Damascus. And Iran has already said that it will take revenge. So a lot of incidences, and people take them very seriously, and they are worried.
Israel's military chief has suggested that the war could last for many months, Jan-Philipp. What are the implications of that?
Well, the future of Gaza is completely uncertain. From a humanitarian perspective, the continued fighting will obviously mean even more human suffering. We are already talking about a quarter of the population starving in Gaza, according to new UN figures. And from a political perspective, there's also no plan in sight. Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel should have what he calls the overall security responsibility of Gaza for the foreseeable future. And he also spoke about the demilitarization and complete de-radicalization of the Palestinian society. But many observers have already replied that this is not a very realistic, not a very workable plan, and that they are concerned that the continued fighting will make a political solution just more complicated.
Jan-Philipp, thank you very much. That was our correspondent Jan-Philipp Scholz in Jerusalem. The United Nations has repeatedly warned of an increasingly dire humanitarian situation in the war-torn Gaza Strip. Now the UN has appointed a humanitarian coordinator to boost aid to the territory following a Security Council resolution. Sigrid Kaag, a former Dutch deputy premier and Mideast expert, will begin her role as senior humanitarian and reconstruction coordinator for Gaza in January. Her task will be to coordinate, monitor, and verify humanitarian relief deliveries. Since Israel began its siege of Gaza, its over 2 million residents have faced severe shortages of water, food, fuel, and medicine. For more on this, we can talk now to Samah Hadid. She is head of advocacy, communications, and media at the Norwegian Refugee Council and joins us from Sydney. Thanks for being with us. Samah, what can we expect from the UN's new relief coordinator for Gaza? How much can she do to improve the humanitarian situation there?
The establishment of this coordinator role is welcomed, but I think that her powers around this will be limited. She has to have the support, of course, of Israel, and she will face difficulties and problems and challenges in doing this role. But this is why we're urging all parties to the conflict and states to support her to urgently scale up aid. Aid needs to increase to support the desperate population in Gaza. And I think the priorities would include increasing fuel to support hospitals, bakeries, water pumps, but also allowing commercial goods to enter Gaza to restore the markets, to support the starving population. But the only real meaningful way to scale up aid is to have a ceasefire in place, because aid workers cannot operate under the current conditions. They cannot do their jobs effectively and safely whilst being bombed and shelled on an ongoing basis. And so that's why we support the UN Secretary General's call for the need for an urgent ceasefire, which is crucial to scaling up aid right now.
You mentioned hunger in the Gaza Strip. Well, according to the UN, a quarter of the population in Gaza is starving. How much aid is being delivered to the territory at the moment?
The aid that's being delivered at the moment is still minimal. It's not enough. It's nowhere near enough to meet the dire needs we're seeing across Gaza. And now with the reports indicating that there is a high risk of famine in Gaza, we urgently need aid to be scaled up. But I think that it also points to the way in which Israel is using starvation as a weapon of the war of this war, which is prohibited under international law. And we have yet to see any real condemnation from government allies of Israel on the way that it's using starvation. And this is leading to a catastrophic situation on the ground, where civilians are not only being bombed to death, but are now being starved as well. And so this needs to end and needs to be condemned.
Talk to us about displacement. You work for a refugee council. Nearly 2 million people have been displaced within Gaza already during this conflict. What will happen with Gaza's population if this war drags on for months?
What we fear is that with now Israel's further expansion of its ground operation in southern Gaza, that more and more people will be driven out of Gaza, pushed towards the border of Egypt, and will be pushed to move across borders to seek safety from the atrocities taking place in Gaza. Israel's continued bombardment and its siege, its widespread destruction of Gaza has made Gaza unlivable. And this is forcing people to move towards tiny pockets in the south where safety is also not guaranteed. What's also worrying is that most recently the Israeli Prime Minister has made comments suggesting that he would facilitate the migration and transfer of Palestinians from Gaza. And this raises the risks of forcible displacement and forcible transfer of the population from Gaza, which would be a serious breach of international law and an atrocity crime. Any attempts by Israel to deport or permanently displace Palestinians from Gaza must be prevented and condemned.
Samah, thank you very much for talking with us. That was Samah Hadid, Head of Advocacy, Communications and Media at the Norwegian Refugee Council.